Questions, concerns, issues. What have I not been clear about? See, I'm a teacher. That's what we ask. What have I not been clear about? That's the way to ask. What questions do you have? If you don't have any because your brain is tired, I also get that.
Have you linked any of this to outcomes? So looking at it, like, I know, for example, HIV and AIDS, you take 95% to control the CD4 counts, etc.
So Lou and Feldman have linked that MEMS data to CD4 counts. Lou for sure did. I think Feldman did. Okay? I have not gotten that far in our reason scale. What we need to do with the reason scale, and it is right here on my list, languages. Because I ain't got them. I ain't got them. And the other thing I don't have is thinking about how reasons may vary culturally. So if you have a group that is not these, you know, not everybody here is white, English speaking, but a lot were. Let me be honest, I'm sitting in the Midwest, okay? So, it's true, I can't help it. But if you are interested in using this single item rating scale and looking at these reasons, then what we need to do is find a researcher near you, or if you have the skills, I'm good with that too. Let's do some focus groups around these reasons in your population. And let's get those reasons fitted. I mean, I think we've got the vast majority here, but something could bubble up that I'm not getting, right? So it's important to think about the overall question. That's why I said email Lou and Feldman, because we need to get their question in different languages, and then we need to get the reasons in different languages and get them out there and get people really using them. So I got work to do. Yes?
Terrific talk. So you mentioned a very intriguing, you made a very intriguing point, and that is that if you understand the reasons, then that's the basis for an intervention. So I'd like you to follow up on that. So have you ever conducted a study, and I believe that that's the case, but have you ever conducted a study to try to link the reasons to a specific kind of intervention versus, for example, the control would be the usual types of interventions that we execute in order to improve adherence? So what can you tell us about your experience with the specificity that you build on from those questions?
I ain't got it. I'm being honest. I don't have it. So I'm honest. And I don't mean that to be a smart ass. I don't have that. What I'm trying to do, as I told you earlier, is to recruit non-adherent patients into a study, and I can't even do that. So we've sent out 300 letters. I got 2 people. Honey, that keeps me awake at night. And I ain't kidding. We're going to use a different strategy using physician offices to help us recruit, but I'm still very concerned about it. I'm not aware of a study that has asked a person, why are you non-adherent, and then delivered a matched intervention. That's very aligned with thinking about a trans-theoretical model intervention, where you use different processes of change and you link them to what stage the person is in. But I think we could think about linking them with the reason. And then the best test would be give the wrong intervention and see if the match works better. That's what they do in trans-theoretical models. So I think from an academic perspective and a research perspective, that would be the coolest thing. The reason I say we have to match intervention with the reason is honestly common sense. Because if you really can't forget, like life is crazy busy, but you sit here and you talk to me about how you know it's important for your blood pressure to be controlled. I don't need to keep spending 30 minutes with you trying to convince you of that. You've already told me you get it. So, and then if we know someone's cognitively impaired, we can't just give them a motivational motivational interviewing intervention. So, you're right, I don't have the data, and maybe we're all kind of silly researchers when we say we've got to match the intervention to the reason, but until I can see otherwise, I do have to really, I guess, promote that if that's the right terminology. But I hear you. I hear you. I don't know if we can do the study. It would be, you could do it at Kaiser. Let's do it at Kaiser.
So you're
I
trying
am
to
not
recruit.
kidding.
Thank you for that.
I am not,
So
I can
you're
help you with
trying
that.
to recruit, so I assume that you have a funded research project?
Yeah, so we have a funded intervention where we are looking at using text messaging, but the text messaging is driven by an artificial intelligence agent. So that it's going to send Ryan certain kind of messages, and it's going to send Nelia certain kinds of messages, and it's going to send Peter different kinds of messages. And over time, it can learn what messages work in theory. That's what we're trying to test for a different person. So, but I got to get not, because I don't need to send messages to people who are taking their meds. I'm not kidding, I'm losing sleep over this thing. Yes?
I'm one of those non-home care adherence persons.
You are?
I was.
Oh, you are. And now you are adherent.
And the reason I'm adherent, I'm now, but the reason I wasn't before is that I just didn't take it every other day. I mean, I didn't take it every day. I took it every other day. And I didn't understand. I mean, intellectually, I knew I was supposed to take it, but I didn't understand the real value of taking the medication. The only medication I take is for high blood pressure. I didn't take it every day. And I would go to Ferris and they would take my blood pressure and they said, oh my God, you need to be on medication. I said, well, I am on medication. Well, did you take it? No, I didn't take it. And one lady just sat me down and said,
you are admitting it.
yeah, but one lady sat me down and she said, it is important for you to take this daily. And now I take it daily, but she explained what it was I was doing to my body for not taking. And intellectually, I understood that. I just did. I mean, and to get people like me, it's hard sometimes when you really need those people. We're busy, we do other things, or we don't read our mail, or we didn't hear it. Oh, that's just somebody, I don't know who they are. You know, they want me to be a guinea pig. I'm not going to do that. I hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have
All right, we got to
we've
go.
run out of time, but Karen, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
I think there's some possible collaboration with Kaiser maybe down the road, so we'll see. Okay, so for the next hour, we're going to have 3 presentations on strategies, specific tools that hopefully you can be thinking about for your practices or organizations that you can actually use to improve adherence and outcomes. So we're going to have them each come up and present, and there's going to be short Q&A after each one, okay? So be thinking about your questions as we have these presentations from these 3 next speakers about specific adherence tools and strategies. And the first one is on medication synchronization and the appointment-based model. And Michelle Tenorelli will be presenting to us. She's the West Coast Director of Clinical Services with Rite Aid. So, Michelle.
What I'm going to talk about is I'm really going to talk about kind of what Rite Aid has done in this field. Now, we have tried multiple things. This is our most recent one. And it's interesting because this program actually started several years ago with a meeting we had with Pfizer. And they said, hey, there's this pharmacy in Southern California that's doing this thing that's awesome. So we flew out to Long Beach and we visited with the pharmacist and we talked a little bit about it and we did a pilot program. And for any of you that know anything about corporations, a corporation always does a pilot program first. And that's their way of thinking about doing a program and implementing a program. So we started with the pilot program a few years back and everything was manual. So we entered a pharmacy, we had some pharmacies in Pennsylvania, we had a whole district, and eventually it kind of rolled out farther and farther, but everything was pen and paper. So what we found, a couple things with it was, first of all, it works. The appointment-based model works, but it only works for a certain type of population. So it works with patients who take multiple medications. So the person that's coming in to get their birth control every month, they don't really need us to remind them to pick up their birth control. It's something they're compliant or adherent to on their own. But we do have a lot of patients that get several medications or maybe only get 1 or 2 medications, and this appointment-based model helps for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is because they get to come in and spend more time with the pharmacist. So how does that work? Because we know we all don't have time, right? Who has enough time to sit down with the patient for 15 minutes every time they come in? Just to talk about how their medication's working. Or maybe talk about MTM. So the good thing about the appointment-based model is that we focus on the top 20% of our patients that really use about 60 to 70% of our prescriptions. So if we focus on this patient that gets a lot of medications from us, they usually take up more time because they come in 3 times a month, or they call us 3 or 4 times a month. They also have more issues because they are taking their medications for different reasons. And when Karen talks about specifically, you need to talk about a specific medication, she's absolutely right. Because we do have an internal program where we kind of track what these patients are taking on a regular basis. That's how we identify patients that potentially are candidates in our pharmacy for this appointment-based model. We call it one trip. Could be called medication synchronization, appointment-based model. It has lots of names. But basically what it is helping our patients to coordinate their medications to a single time that they can come into the pharmacy, spend a little bit of time talking to the pharmacist about their medications, about their therapy, and then maybe taking advantage of some other types of services that they can offer, for example, immunizations, or medication therapy review, or if they're having side effects, adding a medication that they need. For example, a diabetic patient that's on an ACE inhibitor already, maybe talking to them about some of the best practices. So that's how we've kind of coordinated this. And we found that as we get the patients to about 75 to 100 patients, it actually frees up a lot of time for the pharmacist to be able to spend more time with these patients. So believe it or not, that's not a huge amount for a single location, but it makes a huge impact. So a couple of my slides are, this is basically an article about medication synchronization. We pulled it from Pharmacist's Letter. We've pulled a few other items together that we provide to our pharmacists to look at, but basically talks a little bit about the strengths and the advantages, which you guys have all heard a lot about. And as you can see, this isn't my slide because I didn't even know that it was automated. So, and there's the importance, and again, we all know about the importance of non-adherence, the importance of patients taking their medication, and what it really does do to the overall health of the patient, but also the economic effects of it too. So what we basically looked at is we started this model, we did it on paper and pen, and then we talked to our pharmacists and said, how could this be better? We want to roll this out, so how can this be better and how can we help you? And really it came down to a couple things, one of which was automation. So having a computer system that could help the pharmacist to synchronize the patient's medication, also identifying the specific patients. Because the pharmacists could identify a certain number of patients, and usually it was the ones they liked. It's the patients they like to talk to, it's the patients they like to work with. That's not necessarily always the patient that really needs it. So that they were able to identify specific patients, but after that initial group, they had a hard time looking at the patient's profile and identifying whether this patient would be of benefit. So what we did is we automated some of that so that the pharmacists could use some of their other tools. We call them tools in our profession or in our corporation. We provide them with several things to identify patients. We also provide them with some tools to help communicate to patients. But the whole basis of our one trip is that this particular appointment is for this patient, and it's going to be catered to what this patient needs, not what every patient needs. So when we talk about, we have a lot of other things, like we have courtesy refill, we have text messaging. I mean, we have a lot of things to help patients become more adherent, but unfortunately that doesn't work for every patient. So knowing why the patient is not adherent, and then providing them tools to help them to be adherent. And then we also have given our pharmacists a little bit of background on motivational interviewing and being able to step back and realize that one of the most common things that our pharmacist said is, I'm responsible for this patient to be adherent. It's me that's going to make this patient be adherent. But it's really putting it back into the patient and finding out why the patient isn't adherent and the patient taking responsibility. And it actually has improved a lot, not only the relationship between the pharmacist and the patient, because they're not scolding all the time, but also more as a problem solver in helping this particular patient, because today maybe Mrs. Johnson doesn't take her medication because she forgets, but tomorrow, next month, it might be a different reason. So the appointment-based model allows the pharmacist to spend a little bit of time each month talking to them about what is concerning to them, what they need help with, and what support they need. And it's also, they invite family members if necessary, if the family members want to come. They also invite caretakers that can come in. But because it's their time to spend with the pharmacist, they know that if they have a question, they can call, but they know for sure that they're going to have this special time with them. And so that's kind of the basis and the background on it. So we took a proactive approach by looking at the patient, putting an internal system, looking at the patient's chronic medications over the last 6 months. And remember, this is refill data. So refill doesn't necessarily mean they're taking it, correct? Refill means they're picking it up at the pharmacy. So, you know, taking it and picking it up at the pharmacy are two completely different things. But we have to have some way to start to identify the patients. So we looked at that, and we looked at the patients and taking multiple medications, patients we fill internally based on numbers that may benefit from a appointment-based model or non-adherence. We give that information to the pharmacist, and then the pharmacist, based on the patient's profile, their familiarity with the patient, talking to the patient, decides if this is really a good program for the patient. And so we kind of give them some tools to help them. If the patient decides, then we have a computer system that says, based on this patient's medication refill history, based on what they get, this is the recommended dosing, this is the recommended short fills or overfills that we think you should get them to get to a single appointment. So that's the electronic based to help them with that part of it. So it spends some extra time with the pharmacist to be able to do that. However, they approach the patient at the beginning and say, would you be interested in this? I got my 5-minute notice, and I think I'm only on slide 5, so I better go through here a little faster. So the one-trip refill process, again, we talked about medication synchronization. We contact the patient. We tell them in advance. We would like to sign you up for this program if you're interested. This is how we would like to do it, and what day would work best for you. So we coordinate the patient's care to the day that works for them. This is just a background history, so you can pull that. All the key steps. So basically the preparation, we synchronize the meds. We call them a week before, reconfirm the appointment. Also, one of the other things we do is confirm that the medications that they're still taking are the same. So, you know, that's a big difference than just automatically refilling a medication. So we'll say if everything's the same, and there's a few processes, and I'll just speed up to where it is here, because I have it kind of on the end. It's an automated service, and we tell them it's going to be automated. If you want to talk to the pharmacist, all you have to do is just press this button and you'll get the pharmacist. So basically it says all your medications are the same. If they choose yes, automatically goes into the refill area to be filled on the day that it needs to be filled. If they say yes with changes, it will go into a different area where the pharmacist will contact them. And it could be any change. So the pharmacist will contact them and ask them specifically what changes we're looking at. If there's no or there's no response, the pharmacist will still follow up and contact them and find out why they don't need their medications refilled, what medications they do need refilled, and if there's something else going on. And there could be lots of reasons for that. So once they've called and got the pre-appointment call, then the patient comes in, they meet with the pharmacist at a specific time or a specific day, whichever works best for the patient. They go through their medications that they're getting, they go through side effects, and the very first question they ask are, do you have any concerns about your medication? And then they focus on a single item that is important to the patient, but also important to their overall health. So they don't try to fix the patient the first time they come in. So there's a couple of reasons with not fixing the patient, which is really hard for pharmacists because we want to fix everybody, which I'm sure everybody here wants to fix everybody, is to be able to focus on what's important to the patient, for one, but it's also what's important to their overall health and being able to balance that and remembering that you're going to see them again in another 30 days. Or if you need to follow up with them in another 30 days, you can just set up another appointment or another 2 weeks, whatever it is for that. Basically, giving the patient small parts to take with them so they're not overwhelmed by what they're taking back. So, a couple of handling any kind of outstanding health issues, contacting physicians, particularly if patients decide they're not taking their medication, which happens a lot. They don't think it works. It's the most common thing with blood pressure. They don't notice any difference. So making sure that the physician is in the loop on that, and the pharmacist then offering other types of services at the time they found. So this is what we've kind of done for our appointment-based model. I went through a lot of these slides quickly, so I apologize, because I wanted to make sure that I had time for questions if anyone had any questions. But overall, what this appointment-based model does promote adherence, but not only promotes adherence, because so does courtesy refill. but it also promotes that the patient is taking the correct medication, they're taking it the way they should be, and that they're also getting the best care that they can out of that particular their medication plan with their home group and their health group. So that's kind of the overall, and again, here's the conclusion. I apologize for going so fast. I do talk very fast. So hopefully I didn't leave anything out that was crucial.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
So I've worked on some synchronization projects with our pharmacy that we have on our campus, and it's not easy. I mean, the process, the appointment-based, I love, because you're right, who cares that they're getting it if it isn't the right drug? But the bottom line is that synchronization is really difficult for a pharmacy. How do you get through all the barriers to synchronization, such as who's going to pay for that extra amount that the patient's going to get because they just filled some and not others? So how are you dealing with some of those challenges? Because insurance can be a big barrier.
So sometimes the pharmacists, some insurances actually do pay for a short bill, or they pay for an adjustment. So we are billing for some of those if they can. A lot of it too is how the pharmacist presents it to the patient. So taking the time to talk to the patient if it's being important to them. Now if we can't do either one of those, then what we try to do is we try to adjust their medications to fill a little bit early till they're all synced. The only issue with that is that then they have extra. So it ends up, as long as we're following through on the appointment-based model, we're making sure that they know what medications they have, and eventually they're going to have more than probably a month. They won't get one filled 1 month, and it'll be the next to be adjust. That's not the ideal way. But we try to adjust what we can for patients, because there are patients that can't afford to do a short bill. We also have patients that can't afford to get them all in one day. So we set up 2 days where they come in twice a month to get their medications. So there's lots of things around it, but it is very true that the cost is definitely an issue. However, pharmacists, if presented in a right way, a lot of times can overcome that barrier, just like in making a recommendation.
We have time for one more question.
So have you ever tried to work with insurance companies on the synchronization issue? I'm just curious. It would seem to be beneficial to them as well, but that sounds like a high-level decision that 2 corporations have to get it.
So our company does do that. So part of it is through legislation. We support legislation, obviously, that does that from a company perspective on that, being active in part of that. And then other thing is collecting the data. So we've just started our rolling out of the full corporation, bringing that data back in significant, making sure that it's significant to the payers, and then being able to present something when that information comes out to say, because you have patients in this model, we see that these patients were not hospitalized much. And we actually have a couple of partnerships in Pennsylvania, which is where our corporate office is, where we're tracking that through PQA and through the business through regions, and they're matching it together with the patients in the appointment-based model. So hopefully that data will come out, we'll be able to support it.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Our next speaker is going to be talking about innovative technologies to meet diverse needs. So we have Chuck Lee, who is the president and founder of Polyglot Systems, located in Morrisville, North Carolina. It's founded in 2001 to develop practical, affordable, multi-language technology solutions, and he'll be telling you more about that.
So as a disclosure, I do work for the company that I'm going to represent here. So I want to start, I want to talk about 2 different projects that we're working on. The first one is through Polyglot Systems, and those of you who don't know what polyglot means, it means to speak many languages. And we're trying to leverage technology to automate this, because human-based resource for language translation is really challenging. So we wanted to make this more readily available at a wider scale, and that's where technology comes in. I want to start with a story. So a little quick background about myself. I'm an internal medicine physician. I also have a background in medical informatics through the National Library of Medicine. So I've always been interested in how technology could be used to improve communication between providers and patients. I'm also a first-generation Korean immigrant. Came here when I was 7 years old. And we lived up in Ohio. And when my family came over, our grandmother came with us. And she had a hard time talking in English. And after all the kids grew up and left the house, she decided to move to Los Angeles, to Koreatown, to be with the Korean community. So after I did my medical training, I went to visit her one day and in Los Angeles, and she lived in the senior apartment complex on the second floor, little tiny apartment. And on her kitchen table was 4 pill bottles. So I was interested to know what she was taking. Picked up the pill bottle, and to the outside of the pill bottle was a white piece of paper with Korean handwriting that I can't read anymore. So I asked her about it, and she said, you know, she goes to see the doctor who's Korean and talks to her in Korean, but sometimes she doesn't understand what he says because he talks over her head. But he gives her a script that she knows to take to the pharmacist. She goes to the pharmacist doesn't talk to her. She gives him the script, the pharmacist gives her a pill bottle she can't read. And then she has to go back to the apartment complex, and somebody there writes it on a piece of paper and tapes it to the outside of the pill bottle. So whether they got the translations wrong or mixed up the bottles, I have no idea, right? So I thought, this can't be possibly the way we're doing this. So I talked to the folks at the FDA, and this was about 10 years ago, and they said, yeah, it would be nice to do things in other languages, but we're still working on English. And to give you an idea, they've been working on English for over 30 years, which means at what point are we going to address the needs of patients who can't read English? And think about all the medication errors that is happening that we don't know about. And you know, I have friends in the language services community, and they tell me these horror stories. To give you one gross example, this patient went in and had a prescription for betadine douche. You know what a betadine douche is. And went home with it, and the patient came back to the pharmacist, and he was interested to know how it worked. And he says, you know, how did it work for you? And she said, I think it worked well, but it tasted really bad. Okay, so that's a really simple example, and you've heard stories where patients put, you know, liquid medicines for an ear infection in their ear because that's where the problem is, and you know, we run into these types of things. So we submitted a grant to the National Institutes of Health to see if, and it was through the National Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities, to see if they might fund the technology to make these types of medication instructions available in multiple languages. So this is how we got started. So our goal is to develop practical, affordable, multi-language technology solutions to improve healthcare access and reduce disparities for underserved and limited English proficient patients. So why do we target underserved and LAP patients? Because they're the ones that need the most help. So if you looked at, you know, equal care versus equitable care, we're talking about these patients needing some extra help. And being able to provide languages in a form that they can actually read and understand is really important. And you know, you've heard the issue of low health literacy. So why is low health literacy such an important issue? Because they found out that low health literacy is a better predictor of health outcomes than income status, socioeconomic class, educational level. So low health literacy is a problem that we can address. And the reason I want to bring this up is that low health literacy is basically 3 things. Number one, it's a personal skill that the patient knows how to gather information, number one.